Thanks for tuning in to Bite Size Book Reviews. It's V today, and this morning I finished reading a book called The Eighth Detective by Alex Pavesi. So this book was basically structured like a novel except with 7 short stories woven throughout the narrative. So it begins when a young woman called Julia Hart approaches a mathematician called Grant McAllister with the proposal to publish a self-published collection of murder mysteries from, I think it was something like 20 years ago, that someone found in a collection of secondhand books. So the idea was that this mathematician wrote a paper once that sort of looked at murder mystery, or I think he called them technically at murder mysteries using mathematics, only he likes to use the word killer as opposed to murderer, since he includes, for instance, suicide, because technically the killer is the victim themselves. But anyways, he talks about using mathematics to describe the features that are necessary and sufficient to making a murder mystery, meaning that all murder mysteries must have these ingredients, and if you have these ingredients, then it's considered a murder mystery. And each of these 7 short stories is supposed to represent one of these basic concepts. So for instance, they have he considers the minimum number of suspects in a murder mystery to be 2. So there's one short story where it is 2 suspects, and he talks about how this kind of story is unique because when you only have 2 suspects, 2 possible killers, then both people know who the killer is. This is something that's not true in any other setup, because when you have multiple suspects, then no one really knows for certain who the killer is except the killer. So anyways, each of these short stories represents a different idea. So the 2 suspects, the kind where all the suspects are the killers, or the kind where half the suspects are the killer, one where the detective is the killer, and basically these different types of stories. So the interesting thing about the setup of this story, however, is that as this editor, Julia, and the mathematician go through his stories, she, I guess, points out certain discrepancies. It turns out that each short story has certain inconsistencies, and it all seems to relate to a real-world murder that was unsolved from around the same time as the book's publication. And, this strikes her as something extremely strange, and she really pushes at this person at the writer to see what exactly is going on. So you have the different mysteries within the short stories, then you have the bigger mystery going on outside of the short stories in regards to the writer of these short stories and the relationship between these short stories and the unsolved murder case from 20 years ago. So I guess technically I did not actually enjoy reading this book very much. I think I tend to divide murder mysteries often between this is more like Agatha Christie, I guess, where I think the story is really focused on the crimes and the mystery and the what happened. So that's kind of interesting to read. I did read the whole thing because I wanted to know what happened, but I did not enjoy spending time with the characters. I'm more of a Sherlock Holmes fan. I like quirky characters, characters that really catch my interest, that I want to spend time with. Those are the kind of stories that I'm going to reread. If I'm going to read it more than once, it has to have these kinds of characters that really appeal to me. This is not that kind of mystery. It's the kind of mystery that's really focused on figuring out what happened, and I think it does a good job of that. It has a lot of these little mysteries, and the inconsistencies really stood out. She points out, for instance, there's one story where there's a lot of references to white things that are described with the color black, black clouds in the sky, where if you replace all the words with white, then it would make more sense. These inconsistencies were something that, arouses the interest of someone who likes mysterious things. So like I think I read the story for that reason, but I almost stopped reading it because of the characters. Like they were characters that I did not particularly like, and a lot of the murder mysteries were a little bit more like gruesome or horrible, like, and I think that kind of thing tends to not be the kind of story that I really want to spend a lot of time with. So yeah, overall though, like I did read the whole thing. It as a mystery, like it was pretty interesting, just not necessarily the kind of story I would want to read again.